there's two sides to every coin. Then there's a conversation you can join. But I'm an old dog and there's new tricks. And some of my opinions you just can't fix. 'Cause I'm an old man yelling at the sky. I'ma shake my fists at the clouds and cry. Get off my lawn, you snowflake, before I have a meltdown, breakdown, shakedown. 'Cause this is my hometown, so back down, sports clown. It's all just a game, and it's the last down, let down, cowtown. I said it's all just a game. I give the touchdown, the rundown, the lowdown. 'Cause it's over the game, gonna crack down, and shut down, the sundown. I said it's all just a game.
Hi, kids, and welcome to the show. It's our first Wednesday show since June, I believe. Maybe the first week of July. But we're back into our regular schedule. The hockey season is about to be upon us. Very excited you could join us. Very excited about our guest today, Peter Maher, the legendary voice of the Calgary Flames, a Hall of Famer. Actually, 7 Halls of Fame, if we're being honest, as well. 7 Halls of Fame. I'm trying to think of it. No, it doesn't get any better than that. 3,000 plus games. He's going to be back regularly every second Wednesday. So we're excited to have him back. We're excited you're here. Broadcasting live today from Treaty 8 territory. So I'm a little ways away from home, but we came here, we tested it. It all seemed to work. So here we go. We're going to do the show for the next little while up here. As you know, most of you take your vacations in the summertime. I tend to go away in the fall. So here we are, but we're not leaving you. We'll still do the show. Friday, Eric DeHatchuk from The Athletic will join us. He gets back. He's going to do a couple Fridays in a row. We got a lot to catch up with Eric. Then on Monday, it's Thanksgiving, so we won't be doing a show, but we're back next Wednesday. Carla McLeod will join us, the head coach of Ottawa of the new Professional Women's Hockey League. So we got a lot to do. Really, we got a lot to do. As we sit here today and speak to you, we're on a game day. So if you're streaming this live right now with a handful of other people, this is new information. If you're, if you're collecting the podcast, downloading the podcast, perhaps you're going to be listening to this after the game has happened. So we'll take that into consideration. The Calgary Flames find themselves on the road tonight, playing Game 7 of 8 of the preseason up in Edmonton. Take a look at these bad boys. Here's your 2 rosters. Now, if you look on the, I guess it'd be the right, the Oilers, that's going to be pretty much an NHL. I guess Campbell would be the backup, not Calvin Pickard for Stuart Skinner. But you look at it, there's not a lot missing from that lineup. 97 is playing along with 29. So, the 2 best players in the league will be in the lineup. And then over on the column for the road team, take a look at this. Danny Vladar, Nikita Zadorov, Jordan Osterley, Sharon Govich, Dubé, and, Dryden Hunt's got some NHL time to him. But holy cow. If you're like me and this stuff drags on, this is, I'm excited from a Calgary standpoint. Throw the kids to the Wolves. No better test than what they're going to get in Edmonton tonight, but I can certainly understand the frustration from Oiler fans if they're coming to watch a preview of the Battle of Alberta, which they will see at the Heritage Classic. There was Heritage Classic news. We might get to that today. Kevin Rooney is injured, by the way. We found that out. Sounds like it might be a little bit long-term. As well, Pelche is out. That is going to be long-term. So some moving at the bottom. I know a lot of people are talking about Connor Zary and his camp. Ryan Huska complimentary of Zary today, suggesting that he's gotten better since game 1, which is what you want to do. You want to progress. So we expect to see him tonight. And Huska talked about using him on the half walls on the first team power play. Speaking of penalty killing, wasn't really, but let's go to penalty killing. Sharon Govich, who the Flames acquired in the Tyler Toffoli trade, comes over with a bit of a reputation as a penalty killer. He's going to get a crack at it because he's going to face the number one power play a year ago in the NHL by a margin, a historical power play, if memory serves me correctly. So, and I know that 97 and 29, those whose name we will not use because we do not want to conjure any bad mojo, they're not going to go all out. They're likely going to go three quarters. But that combination, along with a couple of other pieces, going three quarters is still better than 150% of most of the power plays in this league. So a good test. Dylan Dubé likely going to get some opportunity in that as well. The goaltending, I don't know if you caught Barn Burner today, former Flame goalie, former Flame coach, now TSN analyst, Jamie McLennan was on. Jamie weighed in on the Dustin Wolf, Dan Vladar situation. It's really beginning to look, and I suppose it should have been right from the get-go. I don't know if we should be surprised by this, but I guess you in the summertime you get caught up in storylines and theories and what ifs and all these sort of things. But it really looks like Dustin Wolf will start again in the American Hockey League. Dan Vladar will back up Jacob Markstrom, and we'll go from there. The ideal position would be to find something for Vladar somewhere else. I feel compelled every time we have this conversation just to point out that, well, Dustin Wolf has done everything he can at the American Hockey League. He has nothing to prove there, needs to get elevated and find out if he can do it at the NHL level. Dan Vladar has shown he can play at the NHL level. Whether or not he can be an everyday one or maybe he's a 1A, but if he's an everyday starter, that's a different thing. But he's not that old. And don't be surprised if Dan Vladar goes somewhere and makes an impact. Speaking of going somewhere and making an impact, I don't wish to make this a season-long thing. I really don't. We mentioned a couple of days ago that Matty Phillips, formerly of the Flames organization and the Wranglers, did sign in Washington 2-year deal. Did get some time in practice on Ovechkin and Nick Backstrom's wing on the right side. Last night in Boston, scored the overtime winner. You take a look at it. It's legit. And this was part of the conversation that I think a lot of people were having last year was this team was so bad in extra time and had such a terrible record. What could it have hurt? What could it have hurt to have Matt Phillips up? Could he have made a difference? Yes, preseason, grant you. But on the road, he played first team power play for a club that didn't have Ovechkin in the lineup, had Backstrom, was on the ice for, I believe, 3 goals, 4 or 4 goals, 4 was on the ice for goals against as well, but saw 15 minutes of ice time, got the game-winning goal. And, you look at the move, freezes the defenseman, and goes up high. Don't want to get into this whole thing of would they, should they, could they have. That ship has sailed. The Flames had the opportunity. We talked to Craig Conroy about it. They would have liked to have brought in Matt Phillips back, but it had to be at a certain price and a certain length, and he did better by going to Washington. Happy for the young man because he's a good guy. That's what this is all about. This isn't about keeping score and keeping record. And I know this invokes a lot of, Marty St. Louis and those types of things, which I'm not always sure that that's necessarily a fair comparison, but B, there's a little bit of revisionist history when it comes to Marty St. Louis. I'm often reminded by people around the club and people who followed the club that it's not like there was a big hue and cry when the Flames didn't re-sign him and he became a free agent. Yes, there were certain people that did believe in him and certain people that saw something in him, but it became a bigger thing when he became a bigger star. Obviously, that goes without saying. So, we'll watch. I'm hoping he makes the opening roster in Washington. That's a team that I don't think are a lock. either to make it or not to make it. I think they're a bubble team one way or the other. So, to say they're not a playoff team, they could be. It depends on how their goaltending it is. And the other thing is the Caps last year were devastated with injuries. They lost Wilson for a while. They lost Carlson for a while. I think, they didn't have Backstrom. Kuznetsov, for those who follow the game real close, probably know he shot his mouth off in a Russian media interview and really didn't like the previous coach and buried him a little bit. So, kind of got to show up and prove your point. So we'll see if he can do that. But anyway, we're all doing the predictions, right? We're all, who's going to make it and who isn't going to make it. And the Capitals are a team. I think they're like Pittsburgh, the Islanders. There's a whole bunch of teams in the East, in the West. Calgary's probably in that category for many of you as well. What are they? Who are they? Are they a playoff team? Or are they not a playoff team? If they made the playoffs, would you be surprised? If they didn't make the playoffs, would you be surprised? The better question to ask, and we'll come back to the locals in this, the better question to ask is, would you be disappointed? Do you look at this Calgary Flames roster as constructed with the players that are on it? Even we still don't know what the bottom three might look like, or the extra forwards and that type of thing. Don't know if they're going to have Oliver Shillington all year. Are they a playoff team? I think they are. I think they should be. I think they need to be held to that account. But if they don't make it, would you be shocked? And I think there's a number of teams in the National Hockey League, of which Washington, and I don't know why I brought up Pittsburgh. I suppose it's that rivalry that those two teams have, that you kind of slot them in together. But yeah, I'm excited about, getting the season going. I just got that. Get the season going. The preseason. I think I was right about this. Again, here I am talking about revisionist history. I could go back and write it, but I think the stories at the golf tournament, they're at the captain's skates, are not the stories we're talking about today. I think a lot of it had to do with who the captain was going to be, whether or not Lindholm's going to sign. We know who the captain is. We don't know if Lindholm's going to sign. There seems to be lots of people, including Frank Seravalli of Daily Faceoff, who believe he will be and could be even prior to the season. A lot of the conversation seems to be more around, the fun stuff, which is who's going to make this roster and who isn't. Adam Klapka, the beginning of camp, really garnered a lot of attention. He's going to be in the lineup tonight. Another guy we talked about. Now, actually, I saw a little bit of social traffic is Martin Pospisil. Pospisil will be in the lineup tonight. A couple of years ago, in that Stockton year that they played up in Calgary, his start of his season, he really looked like he was ahead of Adam Ruzicka for me 4 or 5 games into the season before he got hurt. It might even been, be sooner than that, but when he got hurt. Ruzicka puts up with a lot of points, but Pospisil was, kind of in the middle of everything, in the thick of everything. And I know injuries have been a huge problem for him. He's another guy that, all things being equal, would love to see get an opportunity. Emilio Peterson is in the lineup tonight. The diminutive scoring forward from Norway has shown moments of brilliance in the American Hockey League, but hasn't been able to really catch the attention of the National Hockey League club. So he gets a go tonight. The back end, Zadorov's in that roster in Edmonton. So is Osterley. And then the rest of it is, young Jeremy Poirier, who, had an outstanding rookie season in the American Hockey League, put up some gaudy offensive numbers. You got to think tonight up in the nation, in the provincial capital, I was going to say the nation's capital, the provincial capital, he'll likely get some power play time. How many power plays, the Flames draw remains to be seen. Just a couple of other notes from around the National Hockey League, and mostly because he's a local guy from Canmore. Jacob Bernard Docker cleared waivers, which maybe shouldn't come as a shock. but it wasn't that long, thought to be one of the long-term keys on the back end for Ottawa. But they waived him. And I believe he has 2 years remaining on a one-way deal. So some interesting names showing up in the last couple of days. Former Flame first-round pick Mark Jankowski on waivers today by Nashville. And there's some other players there. Waivers are always interesting. You know, the juggling of rosters. I would punt this over to Mr. Pike at Flames Nation because he does the mailbag and those types of things. Wonder how much, you know, I just don't get the sense that the Flames are, you know, they're watching the waiver wire. That's somebody's job, right? But I just don't anticipate them going outside the organization right now for the types of players that you would get on waivers. That could change very quickly. I just saw a note from Pete too. One of the things we're going to be talking about, I haven't even mentioned him, is Matt Coronado. Coronado is not going to play tonight. Edmonton played in the 5-4 win, was huge in the 5-4 win against Winnipeg. It'd be a shock. Absolute shock. Let's do this right now. Why wait? Why brought to you by Seller Snow? He said 76 years in Calgary, soon to be 77. 2 locations are open right now. McLeod Trail by Shin Ridge Road. 2 more will open up pretty soon. At the best, new skis, new snowboard, new clothing, whatever you need to go and have that backcountry adventure, that skiing adventure this winter. It's skisellersnowboard.com. Very pleased to have the Hall of Famer join us. Peter Marda again to talk about, obviously, but most importantly, again, the screen here. We're both remote today, and I don't know that might create havoc for poor old Jack back at the studio. We thought we had him. Pete, are you there?
I'm here. I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh,
hello.
Right. We got lots to catch up with Pete about the Flames camp and some historical context to both of those. There he is. Now there he went. He was there. Pete, can you hear me?
Oh. I can hear you. I just tipped the
there you go.
phone here and okay, we on now? Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you, Pete. There you are.
Okay. I can hear you. I can't see you, but I can hear you. So.
Oh, that's all right. There's not much to see, Pete. There really isn't much to see, but I can see.
Yeah, the same on
this end, Rob. Matters. How are you, sir?
Okay. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Very good. Thank you. Pardon me. Sorry.
How was your summer? Eventful, uneventful? How was your summer? Eventful, uneventful?
Yeah, my summer was good. I got an opportunity to go down to New Brunswick, of course, my homeland, down there for the first time in 4 years. With COVID, of course, I wasn't traveling very much. So I got to go down there and spend some time with family and friends there. And we also had a reunion for a hockey team that I was involved with in Campbellton, New Brunswick back in 50 years ago. So that was nice getting a lot of that gang together and reminiscing about the old times. And then I golfed a fair amount here in Calgary at the Cottonwood Golf and Country Club. But I should note, this is the first year that I didn't play in a charity golf tournament in 45 or 6 years. So I had some problems there with my knees. So I decided that I would step back from playing in the charity tournaments in case it rained. So other than that, the summer went pretty well.
Well, you had a busy summer. New general manager Craig Conroy, I think much to the chagrin of some fans, I don't know if they feel that way now, but it was quiet for the Calgary Flames, which is a bit unusual, Pete.
Yeah, you're right, Rob. And through the course of the summer and making my rounds, you'd run into fans, of course, and they'd always ask the question, why haven't the Flames done anything? Why haven't they done anything? Of course, there's lots of talk from about July 1st on, if not even before that, that the Flames probably would be quite active in the summer, making some player moves to adjust the lineup a little bit, especially given the fact that they had 6 or 7 players that are going into the final years of their contract. And of course, Craig Conroy, general manager, did make it very clear that they did not want to have a Johnny Gaudreau situation like they had the year previous, when at the last minute he decided he wasn't going to re-sign here as a unrestricted free agent, and went on to Columbus, and they lost him without getting anything in return. So yeah, given all of that, we thought this would be a pretty active summer on the part of the Flames, but it didn't turn out that way, obviously. And I think, just guessing, but I'm guessing that that Craig Conroy, talked to a number of teams about the possibility of having potential trades, but I'm guessing he didn't like the return that the teams were offering at that particular point in time, and decided just to stick with the guys. And in the meantime, he's trying his best to sign some of those guys, and he actually was quite successful in getting Michael Backlund to re-sign with the team with a 2-year contract extension. His contract, of course, that he has now runs out after this season. So, and I'm also hearing that Elias Lindholm is another guy that Flame fans are hoping they can keep here on a long-term basis. I've been hearing from some sources that they and the Flames are getting close to making a deal, although nothing confirmed on that yet. So that's my guess. And so they elected to stick with the group that they have, and it'll be interesting now to see where it goes as the season gets going here shortly, and then how it progresses for the group.
Peter, Backlund becomes the 21st captain in Calgary Flames history. You've called games involving all of them because you would have called Backlund's first games in the National Hockey League. It's something nice to me that, he was a drafted player, developed player, and then late in his career has decided to stay. It's not to say he necessarily finish his career in Calgary, but the table has been set for that.
Yes, indeed. I think when he left here back in the end of the season, that there was a lot of thought that he might be a guy that would not sign an extension with the Flames. Some of the comments that he made and others made led to the thought that maybe Michael Backlund might end his long-term run here with the Flames. But I think after having had a long summer to digest the whole situation, and of course with the arrival of Craig Conroy as the new general manager, Ryan Huskes as the new coach, I think Michael's attitude toward the situation changed, and then sat down, had some contract talks with Craig, and got the 2-year extension, as I mentioned. So he'll be named as captain of the team. In addition to me having broadcast the games that he played, he's also the only player on the Flame team that was with the team for my last Flame broadcast. So it was funny last year when I was down at the Saddle Dome for the presentation of the Peter Maher Good Guy Award. I'm not sure why they call it Good Guy, but anyway, I'll leave it at that. But I ran into him, we hugged each other, and reminisced a little bit about his time as a player. And it was nice seeing him there, and he was one of the recipients of that award that day. So he's a great guy, great person, great community guy. And from what I can gather, from hearing comments from various players on the team, he was the guy that, the guys in the room wanted as captain. I'm hearing all kinds of things that last year he was the guy that would stand up to Daryl Sutter if the team didn't like some of the things that were going on. And I think he gained a lot of respect of his teammates then, and now steps in with the C on his jersey. I was at the game on Monday night against Winnipeg, and it was nice to see him out there with the C on his jersey, and even scored a goal in that game. So great to see Michael as captain of the team, and I think it was an excellent choice on the part of the team. And now they haven't had a captain now for a couple of years since Mark Giordano left, and now they have a guy with the C on. So this all adds to what I'm hoping is going to be a pretty good season for the guys.
So 2 things, Pete. One, they call it the Peter Maher Good Guy Award because calling it the Bonesaw good guy award didn't make any sense. So that's why they did that. And then the other thing, and I'm curious about your observation. This is the first time for me seeing a young player that comes into the system and then was taught by Craig Conroy and taught by Jerome McGinley and taught by Mark Giordano about being in the community. And I'm unabashed. I'm a big community guy. And I am working with Michael on a project with Parachutes for Pets, and he's an ambassador there. But now to watch him pass that information along and help the young guys and what it means to be a Calgary Flame and be in the community and keep that part of the tradition going is very, very cool.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, there's no question that, Michael, when he first came to the team, I remember his early years with the club after coming out of junior hockey. He was a very shy guy, but that is normal. He's, he was a young guy. He's from Sweden, and he was around a lot of high-profile NHL players at that particular point in time. Quite shy, as I'll recall, back in that time. But as he got more years here with the team and that sort of thing, became more engaged and very much engaged in the community. I don't think he's involved as much as you are, Rob, but you are definitely a real outstanding committee person for the city and surrounding areas for all of the endeavors that you involve yourself in as charities. And Michael has gotten himself in a few as well. You mentioned one there. I think there's some others that he's also involved in. I think that's very, very important when you're going to have a younger team, which the Flames are going to have this year, to have a guy like him in that leadership role, leading the way to point out the importance of giving back to the community in various ways. And I'm sure that message will get very much attached to these guys as they move along under his guidance as captain of the Flame team.
All right. Well, since you took us to the community part, I learned everything about it from you. So you're the one that taught me. And your event is this weekend, Pete. So we're going to take a quick break in the hockey talk to talk about something that I know that is very near and dear to your heart that takes place this Sunday.
Yes, Rob, this coming Sunday at Princess Island Park, we'll be having the annual Alzheimer's Calgary Walk Run, and that'll be getting underway with registration starting at about 8 o'clock, and the event itself will start about 9:30 at Princess Island Park, as I mentioned, and I've been involved, and this will be the 17th year that I've been involved in this event as the honorary chair of the Walk and Run, so I'll be down there on Sunday morning and having some announcements at the outset of it to get the people revved up, and then I'll be the signal for each of the groups to leave. And we have a 10-mile run, a 5-mile run, a 5-mile walk, a 1-mile walk, and then I start each one of those off by doing a countdown. And at the end, I just yell out, "Yeah, baby!" And that seems to get everybody motivated, and they start moving along, and we end up having a really good finish to the event, which lasts, roughly about an hour and a half. Sometimes we get some groups that are in there before that. The fast runners get in there before that. But in addition to having all of that and raising money for a great cause, Rob, it is a very, very emotional event. And every year that I've been at this event, it just seems to get more and more emotional, at least for me, because many of the participants bring with them a loved one who has been affected by Alzheimer's or dementia. They have them in a wheelchair, if you will, and then they, wheel them around the circuit. And, and the emotion that is shown at that particular time is something that is very, very heartwarming. So I'm pleased to have been involved with that all these years. And this year's event, from what I'm gathering, could end up having a record too, based on the people that have submitted their entry forms so far. And you can still do so by going online at Alzheimer's Calgary Walk Run. So I'm certainly looking forward to that. Checking the weather forecast for Sunday, it's looking to be very good, and hopefully it'll stay that way. There's, of all of those events, there was only one that I missed, and that was the one time when the Flames were on a road trip, so I couldn't be here for that Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend Alzheimer's Walk Run. So that's what I'm looking for coming up this weekend.
Yeah, but I believe there was also a couple, though, Pete, that you probably should have missed and cut some charters close, right, to get there and then speed off to the airport to join a road trip, right?
Yes, I did that for sure. Yeah, got there, got it started, got there at the finish, and then had to rush to the car and rush out to the airport to catch the flame fight to wherever the team was going on that particular day. So this all started, actually, Rob, I should mention, back in the season when we did not have any NHL hockey, the 04-05 season. The Flames ambassadors had a luncheon that time at the Westin Hotel, and they were honoring me. And they raised about $12,000 from that event, and they asked me at the time who I wanted it donated to. And it was soon prior to that my mother had passed away after having Alzheimer's. So I asked that it be donated to the Alzheimer's Calgary group, and that's where it went. And soon after that, they came to me and asked if I would serve as the honorary chair for the walk run. And so that's continued on ever since then. It's a way for me personally to honor my mother and recall her great memories. But at the same time, as I was mentioning, it really is heartwarming to be out there and see all of the great emotion that is shown by the people that are involved in the walk and run. Especially what's heartwarming is when you see them, as I mentioned, with a loved one that is affected by it.
That, and it doesn't hurt that this city, or Calgary, is gorgeous in the fall, and it's a beautiful setting.
Yep, and definitely is no question about that. So looking forward to that on Sunday.
All right, you mentioned babies. You actually gave one this past Saturday out in Okotoks at the Western Canadian Professional Hockey Scouts roast of Ron McLean. It was an honor to be able to come out and watch you perform. But what a night, Pete! What a night!
That was an excellent night, Rob. Certainly, a great initiative put on by the Western Canada Professional Hockey Scouts. This is a group of people that they don't get a whole lot of recognition. The Scouts in the hockey world, who have been procuring players for the NHL teams for decades and decades and decades. And now they have come up with this association that annually is going to have an event at Okotoks. And this was the kickoff event of that. And they asked me to be one of the 6 roasters of Ron McLean. And I was delighted to be involved and participate in that activity. And certainly it was a wonderful night. I mean, there were so many laughs that went on with the great group that they had that were doing all of the roasting. And a lot of it was, most of it was in, or all of it was in good-natured fun. It was good for Tim Hunter and myself to rib Kevin Lowe a little bit, the Edmonton Oilers former player who was on the speaking list as well that night. And of course, he fired some back at us also. And we took some great drives at Ron McLean through the course of the night, with John Shannon also being there, as well as Friedman from Hockey Night in Canada. And of course, we had Dennis Bayak, who was the master of ceremonies for the event. And there were some presentations that were made to the longtime scouts who were in attendance at the event, and certainly enjoyed myself immensely. And glad that you could be out there, Rob, to see all of the facilities that went on. And of course, you were able to share in all of the laughter, as well as the great shots that were being taken at the various guys out there, but most particularly at Ron, since it was night we were roasting him. And of course, he's an easy guy to take some shots at from time to time, but he's also good at giving it back. So it was for a great cause, and I was very happy that could contribute in some small way. And of course, you mentioned, baby, at the conclusion of my address, I did thank all of the people who were there and told them that they were in the win column. And then I gave out a large baby to the crowd. So they embraced that very much. And it was just a wonderful evening. And then I sat down and listened to all the other speakers. So I was the leadoff man.
Pete, so much to touch on, but I just want to make mention of so part of what the mandate is for this group is they're going to start a wall of fame for scouts in Okotoks. And I didn't realize this, and I bad on me, but Craig Button, our dear friend who works for TSN, did the explanation, and Garth Malarchuk, who's we both know and is the brother of Clint Malarchuk, the former Flame goalie coach. They did a great job of coming up with this cause, but the scouts aren't honored by the Hockey Hall of Fame. I mean, we've had this conversation before. Broadcasters are recognized and trainers are recognized, but scouts are just kind of that missing ingredient. And I would put it back to you that, what would the Calgary Flames be without Ian McKenzie?
That's right. Ian McKenzie and the amazing selections of players that he made when he was the chief scout for the Flames. Or actually, started off prior to that just being as a regular scout, and eventually moving up to the chief scout for the Flames organization. He drafted so many great players in the in the 80s and in the 90s for the Flame team. One of the things that I did in cooperation with the event on Saturday was do interviews online with Cliff Fletcher, the general manager of the Flames from their days in Atlanta, and then in the first 12 years here in Calgary, and he was general manager when the Flames won the Stanley Cup in '89. Also did an interview with Glenn Sather, the general manager coach of the Edmonton Oilers for all those years in the 80s and the 90s, and the mastermind behind those 5 Stanley Cups that they won. And both of those guys talk very, very highly of the importance of scouting, and they particularly pointed out Cliff, of course, Ian McKenzie, as you mentioned, and Cliff, of course, talking about Barry Fraser and also Lorne Davis and the input that they had in making those Oilers teams strong, powerful teams that won the Stanley Cup, 5 out of 8 years or whatever it was, and they talk how important it was to have a scouting staff and how they should be recognized. And they also had some interesting stories. For instance, Glenn Sather was mentioning in the interview, talking about Grant Fuhr, of course, who came out to be such an outstanding goaltender, a Hall of Famer. He said that when they were, he had been drafted by his chief scout. He'd asked Glenn to go out and interview or go out and see Grant Fuhr in action in the Western Hockey League when he was playing with Victoria. And Glenn saw him play 3 times, didn't like what he saw, and so he was at the meetings and he was saying, I don't think we should draft this guy early at all, if at all. And Barry Fraser would keep insisting, no, draft him early. He's going to be great. And then when they got to the draft that year at the drafting table, again, Barry Fraser was pushing the point that he wanted to sign or draft Grant Fuhr. And finally, Glenn relented and drafted him. And he said, of course, he went on to a great career. So he said, I wasn't a very good general manager when it come to scouting, but the scouts do an wonderful job. And of course, he patted Barry on the back for that and many, many other maneuvers that he made. And I well remember with Ian McKenzie, with the Flames back in 1986, we were at the draft in Detroit. And the draft was going on, and we got to, I think it was the 8th round or 7th round, I forget what it was now, when the Flames drafted Theoren Fleury to the team. Theo had been eligible for the draft the previous year and wasn't picked up. And in the second year of eligibility, he didn't get picked up until the 7th or 8th round. And I recall that Ian telling me later that at the Flames drafting table at that point in time, there was a lot of discussion of not drafting Theo at that point, but Ian was insistent on drafting him, and of course they did, and he went on to have himself such an outstanding career and a member of the Stanley Cup winning team in 1989. And I had there with my broadcast equipment, I had it all packed away because usually once you get beyond the 2nd or 3rd round, you don't usually do interviews with players. And
Sure.
So Ian came over to me, and he had Theo Fleury's phone number. I believe it was in Russell, Manitoba, where's his hometown. So he said, phone this guy and do an interview with him. And so I said to Ian, well, Ian, we usually don't draft. We usually don't make telephone calls for interviews for 7th or 8th round draft picks. But he pushed it, and so I took the equipment out again and certainly got on the phone and called Theo and did an interview with him. And I well remember Theo at that time making the comments. He said, I'm really appreciative of the Flames drafting me, and I'm going to make sure that they haven't made a mistake. And so he certainly lived up to that billing and his promise at that particular point in time. So yeah, scouts are, you're right. There should be an area in the Hockey Hall of Fame for hockey scouts. And I know Archie Henderson, who's been a long time hockey scout with Detroit and Edmonton. He's a guy among that group that's pushing very hard to try and get a recognition for the Hockey Hall of Fame, from the Hockey Hall of Fame for the NHL scouts. So hopefully that will have come to fruition, and that they will have a special spot in the Hall of Fame for the scouts.
So I had never heard that story, Pete, about Theo before And what's crazy to me is sometimes these guys know, because the first thing that popped in my head was 2011. And when the Flames drafted Johnny Gaudreau in the 4th or 5th round, whatever it was, Peter Hanlon came over and said, here's Jim Montgomery as coach in the USHL. Here's his number. You're going to want to talk to him. Sometimes the hockey people know, right? Sometimes they know those late round picks are going to turn out. It's incredible.
Yep. And they do a lot of diligence. I mean, these guys spend an awful lot of time in arenas during a hockey season and on the road traveling. Not all of this stuff is done by getting into jet airplanes and flying here and there and everywhere. They've got to drive through some really tough roads in the wintertime when there's snow and ice and all of that type of thing. So, it was great to be among that group on Saturday night. And, these fellows, I'm sure, have some outstanding story to tell about some of the things that happened along the way in their scouting route to get to arenas to watch games. And, of course, a lot of these arenas that they go to aren't the warmest arenas in the world either. So they're in there freezing while they're trying to write notes and drink coffee to keep warm.
This is a little inside baseball, but you and I have both had the pleasure of emceeing hundreds, if not thousands, of events. And I know that this is not an event that everybody's going to eventually see, but I have to just ask you about Dennis Bayak as an MC, not as a roaster, as an MC. He did a great job of keeping it going and all of that, but his patter and his ability to tell a story was absolutely incredible. It's one of the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah, it just absolutely incredible. His storytelling ability, and as you mentioned, his emceeing. And for those that are not aware, Dennis recently retired as the play-by-play voice of the Winnipeg Jets. Prior to that, he was doing some play-by-play work in Toronto with the Maple Leafs and the Marlboros and that sort of thing, and also has done several World Junior Championships, World Championships on TSN. So he's a guy that I've known for quite a long time. And he's just an outstanding, he tells these stories and he's not, he doesn't have any notes or anything for the most part, and just rattles them off and has everybody totally entertained with his great abilities to tell stories and have people laugh and carry on with them. I remember back it was in the early 90s, I believe, when the Flames brought Dennis in. At that time, I think he was working in the Western Hockey League, and the Flames brought him in for a dinner that they had at the Western Hotel, and he was the guest speaker on that particular night. And many people had not heard tell of him, but they certainly knew all about him after they heard him during that night when about 800 people were in the grand ballroom there at the Westin Hotel. I think that story, or one of the stories that he told on Saturday night, he told basically roughly the same story at that event here in Calgary going back all those years. And he really entertained the crowd that night just as he did on Saturday night. So as a guy that's, in this area, probably not all that well known, but he certainly has a great ability of broadcasting and great ability as a speaker.
Well, and just for the benefit of our audience, Pete mentioned it. He was the leadoff roaster and set the tone and had a really nice back and forth with Ron. It was awesome. And then Tim Hunter comes up. No notes. Yeah. There you are, Pete. There's a picture. And then Tim Hunter would come up with no notes. Kevin Lowe came up. I like Kevin. I've known Kevin for a long time. I've seen him in a couple of events in Calgary. He plays that heel, that villain so well and has so much fun with it. And then John Shannon, who, used to be behind the scenes, is now, front. He told some great stories. But I have to stop and just applaud Elliot Friedman, because Elliot, his roast of Ron was basically not an imitation. He wasn't Rich Little up there doing an imitation, but he wrote out this and tied everything together like Ron would. But he used all of these connectors from that night, from the presentations we heard. Pete, it was just some brilliant writing, and he was doing it right at the table with us.
Yeah, and I always admired the work that Elliot's done with Hockey Night in Canada, even prior to that when he was with the Score, etc. But on Saturday night, that was exceptional. I mean, it was the how he tied all of those things in and managed to get the scouts into that entanglement as well. Like he talked about players, years drafted, years did this, years did that, and he'd always have one of the scouts who was the scout that had scouted this player that he was talking about intertwined into that talk. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. Very, very strong speech by Elliott that night. And I thought he was a guy that was great just with his inside information that he has when he's on Hockey Night in Canada. But he went to another level with that outstanding array of words that he put together in roasting Ron, in the same type of ability that Ron does with a tremendous flair. And not only did he do that for just about a minute or two, he did that for about 10 minutes solid, which to me was outstanding on his part. Yeah. And the same, you look at Tim Hunter, he was sitting next to me, and of course he knew I was going up first, and he said, how long are you going to be? Will you give me time to sort of get my speech together? And I just looked over and said, yeah, I'll probably go on for about 10 minutes. He said, okay. But he never took a piece of paper or a pen out any of the time he was there other than to sign autographs. And then when he get up to speak, he just went on and on with a very, very eloquent speech as well, but not a single note in front of him. All of the other guys that were up there, we did have some notes in front of us, but he just did it right off the cuff. And I was quite amazed at seeing that from Tim Hunter, who's become a great ambassador since coming back to his hometown of Calgary, where of course he played with the Flames, was part of the Stanley Cup winning team in '89, and now a very active guy with the Flames alumni in the Flames community, or in the city of Calgary and the outlying areas. So just a credit to him to be up there and speak, and also what he gives back now that he's back here living in Calgary. And interesting to note, Rob, Flames with that Stanley Cup winning team from 1989, 12 of the players from that team are still living in the city of Calgary, which is really, really amazing when you think about it. But they won a Stanley Cup up here, and half that team has made Calgary their hometown. So that's certainly a great thoughts on their part to come back here, and some of them were traded away from Calgary, as Tim Hunter was, as Colin Patterson was, as was Joel Otto, and so on and so forth. But then they came back and continue to be outstanding contributors to the city of Calgary, being involved in various and numerous charities through the Flames alumni.
Pete, I got to interview Tim a couple of times. He was, away with Ron Wilson's teams, San Jose, Toronto, all of these things, and then in Moose Jaw. And he's come back, as you've said, and I'm blown away. Like, he's exactly like those guys. Like, he is part of that crew. He's the same approachable guy. You watch him in Okotoks on Saturday, and people still melt when they get a chance to take a picture with him and things like that. But and he comes to Superheroes. He's one of our volunteers all the time, Pete. He comes and skates with the kids, and he's just, again, I don't know what I expected, but he's an amazing guy.
Yeah, very definitely. I am the same. I interviewed him when he was a player. He was a very good interview. Interviewed him when he was a coach, as you mentioned, with Ron Wilson and those various number of teams he played with, and he was very insightful there. But to see him stand up in front of a crowd and speak as well and eloquently as he did was really, really phenomenal on Saturday night. So, and Tim is just an outstanding guy. And of course, to talk about Ron Wilson, Ron McLean, who was the guy we were roasting on Saturday night. He took an awful lot of punches, but then when he got up, he gave quite a few of those punches right back at you, and he spoke very, very well. Perhaps a little long, but he was up there. Made very, very entertaining notes, just as Ron always does with his comments from the podium on Saturday night. So it was great that we're able to roast him, and now we look forward to having a season of Hockey Night in Canada that will be coming up very soon, with, of course, Flames season starting 1 week from tonight with their opening game at home against Winnipeg Jets.
He did, by the way, and we're going to talk about broadcasters in a second here, Pete. He did something that I didn't think could be done, Ron, on Saturday, and that was he took some shots at you. I've always worried about being invited to a Peter Maher roast because I don't know what I would say, but he found a way. I'm not going to say anything, but he found a way. Pete, let's let's keep going. As you say, the season's coming. Some changes in our old shop, in your old booth this year as a new color person taking over for our friend Peter Labardius.
Yes, indeed. Peter Labardius resigning as the color commentator on Flames radio broadcast on Sportnet Fan 960. And after resigning from that, was signed on as a scout for the Flames. And certainly that was an outstanding move, I think, on the part of the Flames, having known Peter Labardius as long as I did. He's a guy that goes to all kinds of hockey games. Even if it's a night off from a Flame game, he's off somewhere else watching him. I remember one time we were in San Jose. It was an off night, the night before a Flame game, and he dug in and found out that there was a bantam hockey game being played somewhere in the San Jose area, and off he went to watch that game. So that's a great addition to the Flame scouting staff in that particular situation. And then Megan Mickelson now has taken over from him as the color commentator on the Flame broadcast, and I got an opportunity to listen to some of her games here since getting on that position at the start of the preseason here, and Megan's done a very, very good job as she gets herself established as a color commentator on these Flames broadcasts with Derek Wills. So certainly congratulations to her. It's a real big step forward. I saw her last year. She was doing some intermission work on some of the Flame games on television, and now she's in a position where she's going to be around the Flames on a game by game basis, and sure to offer some very interesting insights into how things progress as the Flame season goes along. So congratulations to her on that appointment, and hopefully it's going to be a good long season for her and Derek, as we hope the Flames will have a season that will get into the playoffs and maybe get themselves on a good run at that particular point in time.
Well, what's exciting, Pete, is that Sandra Persina is back as the voice of the Calgary Wranglers of the American Hockey League, and Megan's working in the NHL. So things are changing and changing for the good, and changing the right way, because they're getting opportunities. They're putting in the work. They're getting the reps, and I think that's going to be really exciting.
No question about it. I know, Rob, you have been very, very helpful with Sandra Persina in introducing her to play-by-play work and offering her some very important advice as a play-by-play broadcaster. And I've had the opportunity to pass along a few little notes to her, too, from what I've heard from her broadcast. She's doing excellent work at that, and I look forward to her taking another step forward this year, that she's got had a year of experience there last year, and now broadcasting more games this year of the Wranglers in the American Hockey League. So yes, that's a very, very important steps by these people, these ladies that are moving into the broadcast industry. And they're not just moving in because they are female. They're moving in because they're very talented at what they do and very insightful, which is very important to the listener that's tuning into their broadcast.
Agreed. Well, Pete, I want to take a look at the season and then work back, because there's still some preseason stuff we need to work with. But this is going to be a year of goalies in Calgary, because I believe you're going to Toronto in November, and you will bear witness to Mike Vernon having his name called by the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yes, I'm certainly looking forward to that event. The 13th of November is the night that Mike is going to be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame after his outstanding career, first as a goaltender here in Calgary, and then moving on to Stanley Cup seasons with Detroit, and then also playing with San Jose, Florida, and then of course rounding out his career by coming back here to play with the Flames. And it's very, very worthy of Mike getting the induction into the Hall of Fame, the call that he got back in January from his former teammate, Lanny McDonald, who, of course, is involved very deeply in the Hockey Hall of Fame selection. In Mike's case, he had to wait 18 years since he was eligible for the Hall of Fame, but certainly well worth the wait. I'm sure he's going to celebrate that with all of his gusto coming up in November when they have that event. You look back on the career of Mike Vernon. He started off in the minor leagues, or started off actually playing with the old Wranglers, who that time were playing in the
That's right.
in the old corral. And then actually, I went to Victoria during the 1980-81 season for a playoff game in Victoria that featured Mike Vernon against Grant Fuhr. And because Fuhr was Victoria and Mike, of course, was with the Wranglers. And later on, of course, they would be goaltenders battling it out in the Battle of Alberta. And Mike got his first taste of the Battle of Alberta in 1986. What was really interesting in that 85-86 season is that Mike started the year playing in Moncton in the American Hockey League, and the Flames at one point in December into January went on an 11-game losing streak. And they had a game against the Russians. During that 11-game losing streak, they had a game against the Russians in the Saddle Dome. They called up Mike to play in that game against the Russian team that was here. The Flames won that game, but of course it didn't count in ending the losing streak. But then they brought in Mike after they lost their 11th straight NHL game and had him in the nets. And he ended that losing streak with a strong performance in the Saddle Dome. And then he played a couple more games and went back to the American Hockey League in Moncton, and then get called up again just before the start of the playoffs. And that turned out to be a great strategic move by General Manager Cliff Fletcher, because Mike came in then and played outstandingly in that Battle of Alberta series in 1986 that the Flames ultimately won in 7 games. And then Mike was in a Flame for the next 10 years, including the Stanley Cup winning year in 1989. You know, when they had a reunion of the Stanley Cup team a few years back, I remember talking to Terry Crisp, who was coach of that team. And, you know, he said to me, I never looked at the video of that game 6 in Montreal where we won the Stanley Cup in 89 until just recently. And he said, I was just absolutely amazed at how outstanding Mike Vernon was in that particular game. And not only in that game, he was outstanding in a number of games, especially going back to the very first round that year against Vancouver in Game 7, going to overtime in the Dome. And Mike made 3 outstanding saves in that overtime period before Jim Poplinski finally set up Joel Otto for the game-winning goal, and the Flames went on there to that championship season. So, Mike is an outstanding goaltender, and certainly glad that he's going to get inducted into the Hall of Fame coming up in November. I well recall, after Mike left Calgary, went to Detroit. The Flames had a game in Detroit on a Sunday afternoon, and on Saturday night, I was in Detroit, and I happened to have Mike's home phone number. So I gave him a call and said, Mike, would you be available to do an interview about 2 hours before the game? And he said, sure. And so I said to him, okay, we'll meet outside the Detroit dressing room 2 hours before the game, and we'll do the interview for about 4 or 5 minutes. So anyway, I get down to the arena at the appropriate time. Mike comes out, and I said, Mike, well, let's step around the corner here and just do the interview underneath the stands where it's a little more quieter and not many people coming by. And Mike said, no, come on in the dressing room. We'll do it in the room here. So we get in the room, and we stand up right in front of a large picture they had of the great Terry Sawchuk. So we're doing the interview, and it goes on. So about halfway through the interview, Scotty Bowman, who's the coach of the Red Wings, comes by, and he looks at me and he looks at Mike, and I knew Scotty because when Scotty did not have a coaching job back in the 80s at one particular stretch in time, and I was doing television play-by-play of Toronto Maple Leaf games, going back and forth from Calgary to Toronto. Scotty was often my color man. So anyway, we finished the interview, and I go down to the media lounge, and soon after that, the Red Wings media relations guy comes charging over to me. He said, "You got me in a whole pile of trouble at doing that interview with Mike Vernon." And so I said, "Look, it wasn't me that put us in the dressing room. I wanted Mike to go out underneath the stands where we wouldn't be seen, but he insisted on doing it in the room." Anyway, we got that sorted out a little bit, and then so the game played, and the Flames win that game. I think it was 6-2, and after that, Mike Vernon never played another game against the Flames when Scotty Bowman was coach of the team. And I'll never, ever forget that particular afternoon and the way that situation developed. But that's, that was Mike. And, of course, as I mentioned, he came back and finished his career here with the Flames. What I didn't like about the latter stages of Mike's first term here in Calgary was that it got to a point where his mother and father couldn't go to the games anymore. The fans knew where they were sitting, and if Mike would let in a goal, which he rarely did, but when he did, they would start yelling and screaming and using bad language, not at Mike in particular, but at his mother and father. It got so bad that they wouldn't go to the game. So I didn't think that was very classy about those fans that were situated in that particular area, and Mike didn't like it at all either. He said, it's okay if they want to yell at me, but they shouldn't be yelling at my mother and father. So that's the Mike Vernon picture for today, but there are a whole bunch of other stories that I could interlock in here with his great time here in Calgary and elsewhere.
And as I said, Pete, it's going to be a season of goalies, because later in March, Mika Kiprusoff will have his number retired, following Mike Vernon, who's had his number retired. The only guarantee I will make about that is that he will not speak as long as Mike, and Mike is not long-winded, but Mika's not going to say a lot of words.
No, he definitely won't. As you know, Rob, you were around him when he was here with the Flames, and anytime you did an interview with him, if you wanted to do an interview with him, he was not very long-winded. The answers were short, and he was not nearly as outstanding a talker as he was a goaltender. And I'm also reminded of the time that when he was inducted into the Finland Hall of Fame going back a few years ago, his acceptance speech lasted 13 words. So I'm guessing he might do a little better than that at the Saddledome on March the 2nd when they retire his number 34.
Maybe.
But I wouldn't suspect it'll be much longer than that, unless, of course, he has a couple of cocktails beforehand, which may well be the case. And you know, you think back to Mika Kiprusoff. You think back to Mika Kiprusoff. He was outstanding with the Flames. I mean, the trade that Daryl Sutter made with the San Jose Sharks in 2003 in November was absolutely the best trade that Daryl made in his time as general manager of the Flames. And you know, I'm still firm in my feeling that if Kiprusoff had not come in and been so brilliant in that run from 03-04, when the club went from, when he joined the team, they were in last place in the Western Conference, and from there went on not only to make the playoffs, but to go to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. And you know, there were a lot of outstanding contributions in that team, but none better than what Mika Kiprusoff did with his outstanding goaltending. I mean, he had shutout after shutout, or games where he allowed just one goal in that great run, playing up against some of the highest scoring teams in the league. You know, the Flames took out Detroit during that run. They took out San Jose during that run. And of course, with Tampa, that series went right down to game number 7. Some would say the Flames actually won the cup in game 6, but that's a story for another time. But you know, Mika was outstanding. You know, I believe that he will be the last goaltender in NHL history to play 70 or more games for 7 consecutive seasons. And he did all of that here with the Calgary Flames before he retired. And he was still in his prime when he did retire. I recall in 2013, it was the night before a game in Nashville, and he was at a local bar, as I was, and we were having a beer together. And he said to me at that time, "Don't tell anybody, but I'm not coming back next year. I'm retiring at the end of this season." His contract was running out, and he was planning to retire. And of course, I never mentioned it to anybody, and so it went on. And I understand that at the trade deadline that year, the Flames were out of the running to make the playoffs, but Toronto Maple Leafs wanted to make a trade for Kiprusoff with the Flames, and they were told that Kiprusoff doesn't plan to play beyond the end of this season. And I'm told that behind the scenes, with permission of the Flames, the Maple Leafs talked to Kiprusoff's agent, offer him a 3 or 4 year contract extension where he'd get paid about $7 million a year. And of course, that would have been passed on to Mika, but he turned all of that down. He could have gone on to make some big money playing in the league another 3 or 4 years, but decided that this was going to be his final season, and consequently that trade never did happen, and he ended up finishing that year with the Flames, and then then retiring and going back home. Well, he stayed here for 1 year after he retired, and then went back to his native Finland. And I recall when he was at the Saddle Dome for a game here, it might have been 3-4 years ago, he came over, he was at a game, he was in the Flames owner suite, and they showed him in the Jumbotron. Then they ran a whole collage of his outstanding saves he made while he was the Flame goaltender. And then again, they showed him on the Jumbotron screen, and he waved. And then play resumed, and David Riddick was the Flame goalie that particular night. The very first shot he got, which wasn't a particularly hard one, but it went into the net as a goal. And so I well remember sitting and thinking, oh my gosh, poor Riddick. He had to stand there and watch all those great saves that Kiprusoff made, and then the very first shot he got went in. So, but Mika is dearly, dearly loved in the city, and that should be a great, great night on March the 2nd when that number 34 goes up into the rafters.
Best goalie that I ever got to watch every day. I'm not saying he was the best goalie ever. I'm just saying he was the best goalie that I got to watch every day. You got to watch both of them. Pete, who is better?
You know, Rob, to me, it's very, very difficult to determine which was the better of the two. When you look back to when, if you look at statistics, there's no question that Kiprusoff was the better. He had much better goals against average, more shutouts and that sort of thing. But when you look back to when Mike Vernon was the goaltender for the Flames from 1985 to 1993, take a picture of him and look at the small equipment that he was wearing. Mm-hmm. Then take a picture of Mika Kiprusoff when he was the goalie for the Flames in 03-04, right on until 2013. And his equipment was so much bigger than that compared to what Mike was wearing. And the nets remained the same size in both of those eras. So I think as a result of that, it's really difficult to say who was the better one of the two. Because if Mike had the larger equipment that Kipper had, he might have been even better than what he actually was. But there's one thing for sure you can say about both of them is that when the game was on the line, it was very difficult to get a goal behind them. So, both of them went to the Stanley Cup final with the team. Mike did it twice with the Flames, and Kiprusoff did it once, and he kept the team a team that was in contention for a number of seasons here with outstanding work in the net. So I'd have to say they were equal in their abilities to be goaltenders. Both were very, very quick, and the only difference was the equipment they were wearing, where Kipper had not a bit of an edge, quite a substantial edge on what Mike was wearing during his days here.
Pete, let's finish it up with some preseason talk. You and I have done this so many. We know what the preseason is. We know why the preseason exists. The Flames are 4-1-1, but maybe important this year though, Pete, new coach Ryan Huska and a new system. So probably a little bit more of an important preseason.
Yes. The fact that it's 4-1-1, you're right. It's preseason, nothing to get too excited about. But the fact that they're off to that good a start after the way last year went, I think that's very encouraging, not only to the fans that are following the team, but to the players that are on the team, giving them some confidence as they get set to go into the regular season, having 2 more preseason games to go, both of them on the road. But you're right, they've got a new coach now with Ryan Huska. He's got a much different approach to the way he handles players as compared to the way Darryl did in his time with the Flames. And the system it's much different. This time around, they're playing a lot different than what they were last year. Some of the players are admitting that they're having a little bit of difficulty adjusting to the style of play that Ryan Huska is getting them playing. But that's understandable. That's why you have a preseason, so the players can learn the new system that the coach wants with the club. And they're going through the process right now of learning it that way. And I think by the time the regular season gets going, they should have that pretty much under control. And of course, Ryan Huska, I don't know him very well. I've met him a few times, but don't know him very well. But from what I can gather, he's certainly not a guy that pushes the players as dramatically or tough as Darryl does. And I think that's going to be a welcome relief to the team. But they can't take that for granted. I mean, they still have to go out there and perform to their abilities. And even though they've got a different guy behind the bench who has a different approach to things, They still have to go out there and perform. And I'm interesting to see how the transition goes, because Ryan Huska was an assistant coach with this team for a number of years. He was also a coach of their minor league team, so he knows all of these players from the past, but he knows them from a different angle. He's coming at them now as a head coach, and he's also coming at them after being as an assistant or an associate coach with the Flames during those times of Daryl being the coach. And in those situations, after Daryl is being very, very demanding and perhaps says some critical things to players, it's a guy like Ryan that would have to go to these players and, give them a little bit of pat in the back to boost up their confidence. Now, I well recall going back to the 06-07 season when Jim Playfair took over as Flame coach after being the associate coach under Daryl for 3 seasons. And, it was that way with Jim. He'd have to go after Daryl had given the players a talking to pretty heavily. He'd go in and resume try to get their confidence rolled back up to where it should be. So when Jim came in, he had to change his approach a little bit. Now, he wasn't as hard on the players in pushing them as Daryl was, but he had to be a lot tougher with them than he was previously. And I know there were players on that team that came to me. They said, we don't know who this guy is. We thought he was our friend before, but now we get him in here. We don't know who he is. And because he's being tough on us and that type of thing. And as a result, Jim lasted as coach of the Flames for only 1 season as head coach. And then would go back into that role as an associate coach when Mike Keenan came in to be the head coach of the team. And then Jim went back being a nice guy with the players. So, but unfortunately for Jim, he never was able to get an opportunity as a head coach again in the National Hockey League. So, I hope that Huska has had an opportunity to talk to Jim. Because Jim, I'm sure, could give him some very valuable insights as to making that transition from the good guy to the tougher guy behind the bench. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all turns out. But certainly things are off to a very good start with this team.
Pete, Craig Conroy said right from the get-go he wanted young guys to compete for jobs in this camp, and one of those young guys is Matt Coronato, and he looks like an absolute lock to make this team. And I was thinking about this, and I know Sean Monahan came in and had a good camp, and Bennett and Goudreau, but Chuck Kobasu, didn't Chuck have this incredible camp that kind of put him on the map and kind of forced the Flames to get him into the lineup?
Yeah, he did, Rob. You're absolutely right. And there's, some other interesting little tidbits about that is that Chuck Kobasu was drafted in number 13 overall by the Flames back in the 02 draft. And then when he came to the Flames camp in 03, he just took it all by storm and was outstanding during the run during the preseason, and actually started the season with the team before eventually going back to the minors, but then would come back up later on and go on to have a long, long career in the NHL. And Coronato, he, of course, was the Flames' 14th overall pick from the draft in 2021. Make that 13th for him and 14th for the other guy. I got them a little mixed up there. But Coronato has come in. He got to play 1 game at the end of last season after coming out of the college ranks, Harvard in the United States, and came in and had himself a very strong opening game with the Flames, and of course then went into summer. Now he's come back and carried on through the preseason as the team's leading scorer. He's got 4 goals and 7 points so far with the team, and the way it's going right now, it would seem like he's an automatic guy to start the regular season with the club. Another guy who had an outstanding training camp, when you want to go all the way back to 1987, was Joe Nieuwendyk. He was a player the Flames drafted in the second round. He came in and had a great camp in 1987, and he went on from that season, from that training camp, to make the Flame roster and end up scoring 51 goals to become only the second rookie in the history of the NHL to score 50 or more goals in his rookie season. Joe would also get 50 goals in his second season with the team in 88-89. So hopefully Coronato can come on and have himself that type of season. I don't know if he'll get up to that many numbers, but if he can have a successful season, that would be outstanding. However, just not to put a negative light on this, but I'm often reminded from a comment a coach made to me a number of years ago. He said, "Don't fall in love with a player in September. He might let you down in October." And so, that has happened on a number of occasions as well, where players have had good training camps the first time and they got an opportunity to start with the team, but then things didn't go so well. But hopefully that won't be the case for Matt Granato. He looks like a very mature player out there. He plays the game very strong at both ends of the rink, offensively and defensively. And, another guy that unfortunately didn't get a chance to show what he could do in camp here was young Pelche. He, of course, was with the Flames last year, got to play a number of games, wasn't exactly Daryl Sutter's favorite player. What number was he? But he came into training camp this year with a different number, number 22 as opposed to 46, and had a little fun with that at a media conference. Then it was soon after that suffered a shoulder injury, having shoulder surgery. And now, of course, he's going to be on the sidelines before a while before we get a look at what he could do, probably another month and a half to 2 months from now.
Well, Pete, when we talk next in 2 weeks, the season will be underway. As we sit here right now, my last question for you, you've seen this, you've seen all of them. What do you think? What's the expectation? I talked about it earlier today. If this team doesn't make the playoffs, I'll be disappointed. I think they need to be held to that standard. I think they're a playoff caliber team. What do you think?
Yes, I think that's the best way to put it. And the way I would put it is that when you look at it on paper, the roster on paper, which is a little different than looking at it on the ice, when you look at it on paper, if they keep this lineup together for the entire season, I think they've got a very, very good chance of making the playoffs. Whether or not they can have a strong run in the playoffs, that remains to be seen. But I think if you keep the roster as it is, when I look at it, the goaltending situation is good, provided, of course, and this is another provision, provided in this case that Markstrom bounces back and has a strong year, and he didn't look very good on Monday, I might note, but that was a preseason game. He has to bounce back. A number of others also have to bounce back. Huberdeau and is certainly the main one in that category with the disappointing season he had. Last year, Kadri, of course, has to come back and be much, much better, as do a number of other players. But when I look at it, on paper, the defense looks to be, pretty solid, especially the top four. When you look at the forward ranks, to me, they've got two very good lines and a third line that isn't too bad either. When you look at it, they have three really good centermen. When you look at Lindholm, Kadri, and of course Backlund, and not too many teams can say that they have three solid centermen like the Flames do. And so the third line, of course, isn't comparable to the first two, but Backlund will help in that way. He also helps in the power play and penalty killing. So I look at this team as being a team that certainly has a good shot at making the playoffs. And if they happen to make some moves, particularly if they move some of the key players that contracts are running out at the end of this season, that could weaken the team at this point in time, because those type of deals would likely bring back in younger players or draft picks as opposed to being veteran experienced players that they would be giving up. Right. So we'll have to wait and see how that all goes along. And incidentally, with regard to Lindholm, I've been hearing that he may be close to signing a contract extension with the Flames, and that certainly would go as good news for everybody to hear if that indeed materializes that way. So we'll see how it all goes. With the opening game a week from tonight. They'll have 2 weeks from now. We'll have an early indication of where the team's headed.
Appreciate it, Pete. As always, thanks for this. It was a fun visit, and it was fun on the weekend. Good luck this Sunday too.
Okay, Rob. Thank you very much. You take care.
Peter Maher, everybody, the legendary voice, Hall of Fame voice of your Calgary Flames, and he joins us every second Wednesday. Always a pleasure to spend time with Pete. Of course, our guest brought to you by Ski Cellar Snowboard, skicellarsnowboard.com. 76 years in Calgary. 76 years in Calgary. 2 locations are open now. There are 4 in total. 2 open right now. McLeod Trail by Chinook Center, Bow Ridge Road Northwest. And get in there. If you're a hockey player and you haven't heard about snow skating, check it out. There's some YouTube videos, but Ski Cellar Snowboard has the snow skates, and it's wild. It's absolutely wild. What a pleasure and an honor it was to accompany Pete on Saturday to Okotoks and the roast of Ron McLean. And it's just always so much fun to see how people react when they meet Pete or when they get a chance to talk to Pete, and it's always fun. The pictures. The one thing I did notice at this event was, we've kind of gone from autographs to pictures. Now people are asking guys to do videos, for people who aren't there, record videos for them. So I thought the roasters were very generous with their time with that. I thought that was pretty cool. Before we go, just a couple of notes. Calgary in Edmonton tonight. They'll finish off the preseason later this week, I believe, in Vancouver. That'll give them 8 total games, and then they open up the regular season against Winnipeg next week, and then are on the road. Afterburner returns. As a matter of fact, it's an expanded Afterburner, I believe, coming up this year. I'm not supposed to say that. That might be a cat that I let out of the bag. But anyway, really excited about Nation Network's coverage and Flames Nation Network coverage of the Flames and all the teams actually and grow, which is really, really exciting. Speaking of which, we do have Blue Jays programming for you. The Jays are in Minnesota, down 1-0 in their best of 3 series, so it's do or die. Did not go very well last night. Jose Barrios is on the mound today, going against series situation to stay alive. I don't know. If they don't win, if they lose today, it will be more futility. It will be more angst about a team that is expected to do better. This year it got pitching. It just got outstanding pitching. This is their offense in the postseason since 2020. They've scored 13 runs in the postseason, but they've struck out a lot. I don't know what you do. I know that we had Jermaine Franklin on from TSN in Toronto on Monday. I've kind of run my gamut of the Shapiro experiment. Oh, look at this one. I forgot about this one too. 2 extra base hits in 42 career postseason plate appearances combined. Vladdy Guerrero and Bo Bichette, who at some point these guys are going to be paid. And, 30 million, 50 million, whatever that season total is going to be, they're going to get paid. But at some point, you also got to produce in the postseason, and that's both of their legacies need that. So anyway, I don't know if you blow it up, but it will be interesting to see if Shapiro and Atkins are back. Alex Anthopoulos, it's real easy to look in hindsight and go, geez, they shouldn't have got rid of him. They should have made him the president of baseball operations. You look at what he's been able to do in Atlanta. But those are what ifs and all those sort of things. So it's up to the Jays. Who knows? Maybe when we're talking on Friday, the Jays have won 2 in a row and are moving on to the next round, and everything's great and everybody loves everybody. But I know for Jays fans, of which I'm not a fan, I just follow the team, Expos fan. They're a frustrating team. They are a very frustrating team for people. Either the bats are hot and the pitching's cold, or the pitching's hot and the bats are cold. Runners on base this year has been an absolute disaster. You only get so many opportunities. And at some point, you need to cash your chips in. And it kind of feels like this particular crew, do you move on? Do you say goodbye? I mean, Chapman, I believe, is going to be a free agent here right away. Yeah. Rogers has not been afraid to spend money on this team, but has the money been spent properly? That is always the question when it comes to these types of things. So with that said, that will pretty much do it for us today. We're back on Friday. Eric Dahachuk from The Athletic will join us. More hockey talk for sure, but it'll be around the league. The one thing we did not mention today, and I apologize, bad on me, the Calgary Flames did announce the Chris Snow Memorial will be held next Thursday, the 12th. So the details have been released on that. So the celebration of life for Chris Snow will be next Thursday. My apologies. I know Pete wanted to talk about that. We bounced around and missed that one piece, so we'll make sure we touch on that in Pete's next visit. So that's on me. That's on me. That'll do it for us. I'm going to go back to doing what I'm doing to kind of relax, but I will be back with you on Friday. It's on to the regular season, and then the points count. And everything's fine and fuzzy right now, but it'll be really curious to see where in a couple of weeks this club finds itself, at least when it comes to the public opinion and what's being talked about and spoken about in the media. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to Jack, our outstanding producer. Thanks to you. We'll see you on Friday, everybody.